Okay, welcome everybody to our Happy Melly seminar series. Hello.
Hello.
This evening we have Shamash Alidina, which is going to talk about mindfulness and kindness and a new word that I've learned today, which is kindfulness.
Yes.
Shamash is writing books, giving trainings and speaking. He was sometimes in Massachusetts where he learned some mindfulness, and now he's in the UK. And the topic of today is Happiness Museum and Mindfulness. With this, I pass over to you, Shamash, and I let you talk to us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm really privileged to be here sharing about mindfulness on the Happy Melly call. So just a brief summary of everything that I do to start with. So yeah, as you said, my name is Shamash, and I kind of work in the well-being space, the happiness space, the mindfulness space. And I think my claim to fame at the moment is that we started the world's first museum of happiness in London. And also,
wow.
and also the other main things, I wrote a book called Mindfulness for Dummies, which is quite a popular one, and I've written 4 or 5 other books on mindfulness. And what we're working on right now is a crowdfunder for our second Museum of Happiness. So at the moment, it was just like an experimental space. Now we've got a much bigger space in one of the UK's largest homeless hostels. So there's going to be a space there which we're going to turn into an indoor park. And so people will be able to enjoy it, and people who used to be homeless or deprived children and stuff, we're going to be sharing mindfulness and happiness skills with them. And the future of that Museum of Happiness is that we're hoping to spread it around the world. So we've done pop-ups in Nepal and Singapore, and next month we're going to be having one in Sydney as well. But we're hoping eventually we can have pop-ups around the world. So one of the things on our crowdfunder is actually a Museum of Happiness in a box. So that's a bit of a summary of what I'm into and doing at the moment. But this call is more about mindfulness and mindfulness at work and mindfulness in the workplace. So I can share a little bit more about that too. So maybe I'll start with just a little bit about how I got into mindfulness very briefly.
I was going to ask that question.
We want to know.
Let me try and remember. So I think usually mindfulness comes from some difficulty or challenge that we're facing, and then someone kind of offers mindfulness, and it was a little bit like that for me. I didn't have any concept of mindfulness at all. I was very much a future orientated person, so constantly having goals and thinking about how I'm going to achieve them right from a young age. And when I was in class and doing science, I tried to be the top of the class, and then went on to university, and I ended up picking engineering, actually chemical engineering, just on the basis of, that seems like the highest salary out of all the different engineers, not really thinking about what I'm really passionate about, and did that. And so I got into a good university, and again, just trying to achieve. It's all about achievement and outer success. That's all I knew. And so in the first year I made it to quite high grades. Second year it was a bit tougher, and I kept pushing. And then in the summer vacation there was an opportunity to get a job. So I got a job. And for me, it was really well paid. It was like £30 an hour for a student. This was fantastic. And I was doing this work. I was getting paid. It wasn't very fun, but I was getting the money. I thought, this is what you need to do. You need to spend the money. And it's a very weird experience, actually, because I just spent it on buying some clothes. Like now, I wouldn't think about doing that. That would be particularly pleasurable. But I thought, this is going to be amazing. I could buy any clothes that I want. So I went into a store, bought some clothes in Oxford Street. And I remember stepping out into the street and just looking around and seeing people rushing around buying stuff and thinking, hang on a minute, all this work I've done up to this point to earn this money, to buy this stuff, is not giving me the satisfaction that I was expecting. And the job that I was doing was really, really boring. I was seeing the same person every day. And in fact, I used to take huge lunch breaks, and the lunch breaks were so long that you had to swipe in and out, and they measured how much time I was taking on and off work. I ended up with a negative paycheck somehow because I'd taken so much time off work. I don't know how they worked that one out. So I wasn't enjoying my work, and that financial success wasn't offering me the satisfaction I was hoping for. And that was when I saw a poster in the underground for a philosophy class. And it said that unexamined life is not worth living, a practical philosophy. And I thought, practical philosophy is the opposite of chemical engineering, so let's give it a go. Maybe this will be the solution. And turns out it was a solution for me, actually. I went to this evening class, and the teacher explained something very beautifully. There was this triangular diagram, And at the bottom, it said deep sleep, the lowest level of consciousness. I'm like, yeah, that's true. And it said dream sleep, slightly high level of consciousness, but not much higher. I was like, okay. And then normal wakeful sleep and it says slightly high levels of consciousness, but people are still kind of half awake, half asleep. And if you walk around during the day in London, you see people in this kind of half asleep, half awake state in this automatic pilot. And then the diagram went higher still to higher levels of consciousness. And they said, if you cultivate higher levels of consciousness, you become more present, you become more aware, you're more connected with your senses. That's when you start getting fully alive, because that's when you're actually conscious of what you're doing and you're able to make choices and decisions. Things don't happen to you, but you can actually choose and decide what you want to do and how you're going to respond to certain emotions and situations. So it's about raising this consciousness. I'm like, that really makes a lot of sense. And they said, the more you raise this consciousness, the more beauty you see around you, the more decisions become clearer, life has greater clarity around it, your relationships improve, all these other positive benefits too. And again, it kind of made sense. Like if you're more conscious and more aware, you're more connected. But then they said, interesting thing, they said that there's these exercises that have been developed in the East for thousands of years that actually cultivate this greater levels of consciousness. And it's not like you've got a fixed level. You can do these exercises and they can make you more conscious and more aware. You just need to do them. And that starts happening. I'm like, okay, let's give it a go. Because I was a very skeptical scientist. I wasn't into any kind of mumbo jumbo at all. But what they said made logical sense. I thought, let's give it a go. So I did this exercise and we went through all the different senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. And then we just went into our breathing for a bit. It was just a 5-minute exercise. And then there was an amazing moment where they say, okay, observe your thoughts, but don't be the thoughts. Be the observer of the thoughts. So there's a separation between you and your thoughts. And I was like, wow, I always thought I was my thoughts, but I don't have to be my thoughts. I can step out of it. And there was a great sense of freedom out of that. Like, I'm not even stuck. Like, I could have any negative or positive or any thoughts, but they're just thoughts. They're not really who I am. And the way that I felt after those 5 or 7 minutes was fantastic, actually. So from that moment on, like that was almost 20 years ago, I decided I'm going to keep practicing this and I want to share this with people as much as possible. And so I actually decided to become a school teacher so I could teach it in schools. So for 10 years, I was a school teacher teaching. It was in a school where they had some meditation and they had little moments of pause and reflection at the end of each class and the beginning of each class. And I shared some of this mindfulness stuff with them. So that's how I got into it. And then the last 7 years, I've been focusing more on teaching mindfulness to adults and training mindfulness teachers online, things like that. And now I train people to teach it into the workplace as well, because it's starting to get more popular in the workplace. So that's kind of my journey in a nutshell of how I got into mindfulness. And fortunately, that moment where I was first passionate about it has kind of continued, and I continue to evolve and understand it in different ways. So I'm constantly learning about it. And I suppose you mentioned this new word, kindfulness, that you hadn't heard before. And that's what I've been sharing in the last couple of years. And I'd like to say a little bit about that. So before I explain kindfulness, I think it's important to just explain the basic mindfulness in case you don't know what that is. So mindfulness is about cultivating a present moment awareness, an awareness in the here and now. So most of the time our thoughts are either in the past or in the future. And the research has shown that when they look at people, on average, 50% of the time, our attention is on past and future. But the other amazing piece of research showed that some people are more present than others. And the more present you are, the happier you are. And they weren't too sure about the reasons why. But one kind of guess is that because we have a negativity bias in the human brain. So this means that when our mind wanders, it's much more likely to wander to negative thoughts. And it has evolutionary reasons. If you think back to like when we were living in caves and stuff, all the kind of cavemen and cave women, they're like, oh yeah, I'll be fine now. I won't be eaten by any tigers. Let's just chill. Let's just wander around. They're the ones that died. And all the ones that are like, oh my God, let's be careful, hiding at the back of the cave. They're the ones that survived, and they're the ones that kept mating with each other. And so those ended up having children which were quite scared, and children which were quite scared. So we evolved to look out for fears and not take a lot of risks if we take too many risks, we're much more likely to die back in the old days. And so due to that evolution, if you let your mind wander, the evidence seems to suggest it's going to go more likely to the negative stuff rather than positive. So it's not easy to just force the negative out and put the positive. Again, other research shows that if you just try and paste positive thoughts on top of negative ones, it doesn't necessarily work, especially if you're in quite a negative mindset. It can actually bring you further down. So what mindfulness does is actually helps you to step out of that thinking process altogether, and you get into this present moment awareness. If you look at research on the brain, there's two kind of maps of the brain that can be active. One is the storytelling brain, and the other is the present moment awareness brain. And when you're in the storytelling brain, that's like, right now, as I'm speaking, you're like, oh yes, I'm on a webinar at the moment with Shamash and Christian, and it's from Happy Melly, and he's talking about mindfulness. It's very conceptual. And then the present moment brain is just really there and really listening to the sounds that I'm saying. But you can also think of an example, like if you're walking in the park, your storytelling brain is like, oh yeah, I need to do this, and I need to do this at the workplace, and there's that agile thing I was working on, I haven't answered that Slack thing. So it's that constant story going on in your head, which is running all the time, which is very, very powerful. But you can actually cultivate this present moment awareness. And the more you cultivate present moment awareness, the more those neurons in your brain become active, they become more strengthened, and you're more likely to be present. So having practiced mindfulness for all these years, I'm much more likely to come to the here and now in the present moment, and less likely to react to a situation than if I hadn't done that mindfulness. If I hadn't done the mindfulness, the whole day could go by before me realizing I'm actually alive. So this is what mindfulness is about, cultivating a present moment awareness. But I call it kindfulness because if mindfulness has drawn a lot of its kind of ideas from Eastern philosophies, particularly Buddhist philosophies. And if you look at that, mindfulness is just one part of it. There's another real heart of those philosophies, which is about cultivating kindness and compassion. And so a very nice way of teaching that is just by changing the M to a K, from mindfulness to kindfulness. Because when people think of mindfulness, they think it's something that you just, first of all, I said to someone during the practice mindfulness, he's like, no, my mind is full enough already. I don't want to do mindfulness. It's kind of not about filling up your mind. It's a different thing altogether. It's about a process of letting go. So by cultivating kindfulness, it's about learning to be kind to yourself and friendly towards yourself and also towards others. And when you take this warm, caring approach, you get much more into the mindfulness and meditation practice, and it just cultivates this next level quality. I don't know if either of you have had any contact or seen videos or someone like the Dalai Lama, but he wouldn't take something like meditation or anything too seriously. There's this light-hearted approach. He's always coming up to people and hugging them and caring for them. But, he probably has tons of different stresses and challenges happening all the time. And yet he's got this compassionate approach. So it's about cultivating not just the awareness, but also that sense of love and compassion. Another example of this is, for example, if you're let's say you're a sniper, you want to shoot someone. And then, you're looking out the window and you're really, really present and you're really mindful. You're very much in the moment, and you manage to shoot someone and kill them. You say, oh, that sniper, he's just so mindful. He's so in the moment. I'm just so impressed. Right? It doesn't have that quality that we mean when we're talking about mindfulness. It's got to have that caring and kind quality to it. So that's like the heart of mindfulness, which is why I call it kindfulness. So this is what I teach, and I know a lot of you are kind of interested in about applying happiness in workplace setting. And so that's one of my specialities. I'm taking it into organizations. And by coincidence, actually, I created an infographic on one of my most popular blog posts, which was called Mindfulness at Work. And I wrote a book called Mindfulness at Work for Dummies. And at the end of the book, there's these top 10 tips. So I spent quite a long time when I was writing that book just thinking, what is the essence of the top 10 tips for mindfulness? And when I wrote that and shared it online, it became quite popular. So I made an infographic last week. So I'm going to share that infographic with you guys now. And I'm going to just go through a few of them to give you a little bit more of a flavor of what this is all about. So can you see the infographic?
Yeah, we see it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Cool. So I'm going to just scan through it first of all, just to go through the whole process. So this is 10 ways to be more mindful at work. And the first one is about being consciously present. So I've talked to you about that already, being in the here and now, letting go of the past and future. And then other tips include things like short mindfulness exercises, being a single tasker, reminders, slow down to speed up, making stress your friend. You can see this that's what I look like when I'm working. I don't even have any hair, so it doesn't look like that at all. Number 7, feel gratitude, humility, accept what you can't change, and adopt a growth mindset. So I'm going to just take a few of these tips to give you some ideas about how you could apply mindfulness to the workplace rather than going through all of them. I think the first one I'd like to emphasize is about being a single tasker. So some of you may have already looked at the research about multitasking and the disadvantage of trying to do too many things at the same time. Back in ancient times, again, we had very simple tasks to do, and it was easier to just do one thing at a time. But in the digital age, where we can have lots of windows open, it's very tempting to multitask. But there's this very funny piece of research I remember, where they had one group of people where they had a kind of email pinging in every 11 minutes. They had another group of people where they had to just focus on one task. And they measured their IQ at the beginning and at the end. And when they looked at the IQ of the people that were multitasking, they're like checking the email and going back, and then checking the email and going back, their IQ went down to the equivalent of smoking cannabis while at work. So it really had quite a strong impact on them. So another really good way of testing yourself is if you write, let's say, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then write the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and try doing it in 2 ways. First of all, you write the letters and then the numbers. You time yourself. You notice how you feel. And then you do A1, B2, C3, D4, and then do it like that. And you're switching from one to the other. And you'll be able to feel how much harder it is and how much more effort and energy it takes to switch from one task to the other. So our brain works much better when it's doing one task at a time. So rather than kind of, and it's kind of linked to mindfulness too, that sense of satisfaction, that sense of flow. I don't know if you guys have heard of this concept of flow by, I think I know how to say the guy's name who came up with the concept, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. So he wrote a book called Flow, and it's all about the power of being in the here and now, in the present moment. And when you're really getting into your work, like sometimes I get it when I'm writing or when I'm meditating or when I'm walking, when I'm just really present. You lose your sense of time. You're completely in the moment. You feel that deep sense of joy and satisfaction. And this is kind of very much linked to happiness at work. And this gets cultivated through doing one task at a time. But the other thing I've noticed is that when you do mindfulness exercises or meditations, which I could share with you, your brain is more likely to get into that flow state no matter what you're doing. You could be sweeping the floor, be going for a stroll, you could be just looking at the sky or the trees, and you can get into this flow state. It doesn't necessarily have to be a specific task. Because I think a lot of people, when they think about happiness at work, they think a lot about this concept of flow. And so you can encourage more flow by doing that. So that's one tip I would like to say, is just kind of definitely turn off your email notifications, and if you can, your phone notifications too. I don't have any of those switched on, and just check it several times a day. I was just reading about Richard Branson this morning and about how he uses his time. He's lucky enough to have 2 assistants sitting with him when he's checking his email, and he just does it in the morning. And he's like, I'm very old fashioned. I dictate 90% of my emails. I'm even more old fashioned. I don't dictate any of them at the moment. But I'm hoping to, actually. So this kind of approach. And then he just says, okay, he just does it at that time in the morning, and then he just doesn't check it for the rest of the day. And I think that's a fantastic thing to be able to do if you're able to do that in your work. And the same with social media, boxing certain times to do that. Okay, so that's the first one. The next tip I'd like to go through is this concept of slow down to speed up. When people read the article, the full article, they like this concept. So it says here, effective leaders, workers and entrepreneurs slow down and reflect to make the best decisions and actions. They slow down to speed up. And the best example is if you look at great presidents, people like Obama, if you look at great leaders, Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, you don't see them panicking. Just, okay, hang on a minute, I'm just checking my email. And while you're doing this, I need to do that. I forgot to save the planet. I'm really, very busy. They walk around in a very kind of calm, serene way. If someone comes up to them to have a conversation, they would give them their full attention. They'd be right there. And when that conversation's finished, they would finish it up and do the next task. There's that sense of grace and ease and slowness. but you can't say that they didn't achieve much. They got so much done. So you can actually get a sense when people are rushing around and trying to do too many tasks at the same time, they're actually achieving less rather than more. So whenever you get this feeling of like, oh, I've got so much to do, and you're rushing, try actually slowing down rather than speeding up. That happens to me. Sometimes I've got certain projects to do, or sometimes we've got big events to run for the Museum of Happiness. Once, we normally used to have 40, 50 or 60 people coming to our museum events, the pop-up ones. And I put it once on Facebook and it went viral on Facebook. So the page got 1 million views and we got 10,000 people coming rather than the normal 50 people. And so obviously there's a lot of stress involved as well as a lot of fun. But rather than trying to do less meditation and rushing, doing all the tasks, I actually doubled the amount of time that I spent doing meditation. And I just did like an hour of meditation in the morning because I like meditation, so I'm into that anyway. And that really, really helped me. And I did have to work very hard during the day, but that I knew that I really, really needed to do that practice to slow down. Otherwise, things would have gone wrong even more. So that's the second kind of key tip I'd like to share with you guys today. Try slowing down, especially if you've got a lot of work to do, and you'll find you'll make less errors. This one is a fantastic one. I don't know if you guys have seen a TED Talk called Making Friends with Stress by Kelly McGonigal. And it was based on a beautiful piece of research done over 20, 25 years on stress. And it was done on thousands of people. I think something like 20,000 people off my memory. And there's been loads of research on stress, but they asked a fantastic extra question in this piece of research. And that was this question: do you think stress is good for you? So they asked all the usual questions about stress, but an extra question is, do you think stress was good for you? And it turns out that that was the most important question out of all the questions that they asked. When people thought stress was good for them, even if they had high levels of stress, they lived to old age. And when they did an autopsy on their body, they had no problems with their heart. They lived a healthy, happy life. But if people thought stress was bad for them, if they saw it in a negative way, then it had much more of a negative impact on their body. It was like a self-fulfilling prophecy. When they looked at their hearts, it was more chucked up. They died at an earlier age, and all the other things that go along the negative aspects of stress. So stress, perhaps this stress isn't as bad as we originally thought. It's our opinion, the way we look at it is more of the challenge. So what they then did is they got groups of people and they showed them videos about the benefits of stress. Stress energizes you, activates you, gets you moving, gets the heart pumping, gets you enabled to do more work in tasks. It actually releases a chemical called oxytocin, which is like the hugging hormone. So you're more likely not only to just hug people, but you're more likely to kind of reach out to people or call them, talk to them. So it's a hormone that actually connects human beings to each other. So try thinking every day, or spend a few minutes after this call or at some point, Google the benefits of stress. Because when you look at newspapers and magazines, they always talk about killer stress and the bad level of stress. And it's that headline itself that is actually causing the problem. So that's a nice little tip. And then the mindfulness element of that is actually to be aware of your stress levels and to notice when you start thinking about it in a negative way, to be aware and then to challenge that thought. But actually, yes, I'm under a lot of stress at the moment. All this stuff's gone wrong and it feels like I'm going through a really tough time. But actually, there are some benefits of stress. This is going to really get me moving and activated. It's much more valuable to focus on doing stuff in your life that's meaningful. Like, for example, I could have probably got a very comfortable job doing the engineering or going, like most of my friends ended up in banking and stuff. But I ended up, choosing a career where it's much more challenging in the sense of, trying to teach mindfulness as a full-time thing, creating a museum of happiness, all these kinds of things. But because it's a meaningful thing, I'm willing to put much more hours, much more passion into it. And because of that, I'm energized and I'm activated. And yes, it's stressful, but it's the good stress. The guy who was the scientist behind understanding the pros and cons of stress is a guy called Hans Selye. And he was quite upset that people thought of stress as always a bad thing. So he actually changed it. He called it, there's two types of stress: eustress and distress. Eustress, E-U-S-T-R-E-S-S, and he talked about that as a positive stress, and distress is the negative one when it's too much. So it gets dangerous when it's just constant, relentless stress and you've got no time to recover. But stress in bursts if you see it in a positive way, is, I think, important, healthy part of life. So that's something to think about when you consider stress, and share that with your friends too. I think it's a very, very important piece of research. We can help your friends and family to live longer if they remember that point. So there's loads of, these are all really good, to be honest. It's hard to choose one. I think most of you probably know about gratitude and the benefits of gratitude, so I won't go through that. I'll just briefly mention this concept of humility, because if people can confuse humility with a sense of a lack of confidence, it's not to do with meekness or anything. It's about realizing that for you to be where you are now, there was lots of other people that had to do stuff, starting with your parents and your teachers and probably all sorts of other stuff. And you may be easy to think about all the negative things, let's say your parents did or your teachers did, but there's, you wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for them, and also lots of other people for you to be where you are today. So to remember that helps you to connect with the people around you. And there's a fantastic book called by Jim Collins. It's an old book called Good to Great. And he researched the most successful CEOs that were successful not just for 2 or 3 years, but then made the company successful for 10 to 20 years. And the CEOs of those companies had the top level of leadership, what he called level 5 leadership. And in level 5 leadership, they cultivated a sense of humility. Rather than constantly showing off about themselves, they said, hey, my staff are doing this. The company's done this. It's not just me, it's us all together. And when things went wrong, then they did take the blame for it and try to fix it themselves. And that's what made the company successful over the long term. There's CEOs that can make companies successful in the short term. They usually have high levels of ego and they talk about themselves a lot. And in the short term, you get this burst of success. And then it's very, very short term actions that they take to kind of boost the profits, and then leave, and then it goes down again. So that's a really very interesting to see that, humility is such a beautiful quality that we love to see in other people, but it's nice to see that the research shows it actually leads to long-term positive outcomes as well. So that's really impressive. The last one, I think, accept what you can't change, is this is kind of at the heart of mindfulness. I'm guessing some of you know about the growth mindset, so I won't talk about that. So acceptance. This is a really, really important part of mindfulness. In fact, it's so important, it's sometimes called acceptance-based approach rather than mindfulness-based approach. And acceptance people see as a negative thing. They think acceptance is resignation, like, I have to just accept it. Like, for example, you go to school and your teacher says, you're in detention, but I did the homework and my dog ate it or something. You're like, tough, you just have to accept it. It's a sense of giving up. What we're saying about acceptance is not, it's like an empowered, like, I accept that this is the way things are at the moment. And a beautiful example of this, which I think is important for people to share with Happy Melly and any organizations talking about happiness, is that we cannot have the emotion of happiness all the time. We are human beings that have the whole rainbow of emotions. And we need to teach people that when you're feeling sad or when you're feeling angry or when you're upset, if you try to fight that emotion or say there's something wrong with me for feeling this emotion, then that emotion is just going to get stronger. But if you can learn to say that, hey, at the moment, yes, I am feeling sad. I'm not too sure why, or I do know the reason why. And it's absolutely okay. In fact, it's fantastic to feel sad. It's just another human emotion. There's billions of other people that have felt sad. In fact, every human being has always felt sad as well as happy. It's okay for me to feel it too. Let me notice where it is in the body. Let me smile towards it. Let me breathe towards it. You're literally almost becoming happy being sad. So you're really fully accepting it. And
I think I could be a pro at being happy and being sad. At least my old self could.
You can even be happy being sad, yeah. One of my teachers, he's like a monk and he's a teacher. I told him we started the Museum of Happiness. He's like, Museum of Happiness, but why do you have to force people to be happy? You need to have a grumpy corner where people can be grumpy if they want. I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe we should do that. So people are welcome to feel whatever they're feeling. So there's that aspect too. So acceptance is so, so important. And when mindfulness is being used as a treatment for depression, at least in the UK, this is what they're taught. They're like, hey, if you feel the sadness, allow it to be there. Feel it, breathe with it, take a few moments to just relax and allow it to be. And if you do that, the emotion passes. But because the way depression works is that it kind of sneaks up on you, because if you're not mindful, you're not conscious, and then when the emotion comes, you thought, oh no, I don't want to feel, I must not feel sad, and you try and push it down more and more, and it just gets stronger and stronger, unfortunately. So this is almost a life-saving strategy or technique that you can do, which is to learn to be and allow and accept emotions just as they are, rather than constantly trying to change it. Another analogy, which is a nice way to kind of explain this acceptance, is imagine if it's raining really heavily outside and you need to go from your workplace to the train station. Now it's going to rain, like you're going to have to walk through that rain. So there's two attitudes to what you can take to it. The first attitude is that, oh no, it's raining, and you just try and crank it up, and you just run through the rain and you probably fall over because you're so annoyed, and you make it to the train station and you're also a bit stressed. Or the other way is that, hey, it's raining outside. It's not my favorite weather, but it's raining. Let me just accept it. It's there already. It's raining. It's a fact. And I'm going to have to walk through the rain to go to the station. And so, yes, it is raining, but your attitude is not, you're not putting a negative attitude on top of it already. So you're just allowing it. You're letting it be. You're letting the rain fall on you because you know it's going to fall on you anyway. And that feels very different. It almost feels empowering, actually. So that's great for people who live in countries where it rains a lot. It's a very English analogy.
Very Le Havre analogy. Very. I'm in Normandy. This is
okay.
rain country of France.
So those are some little tips on mindfulness at work. I think I've spoken for long enough now. So let me know if you've got any further questions.
Yes,
for sure. We have some questions. Jane, would you start?
Oh, sure. It was good. Could you could we put back up the
Sure.
The list, just because it'll help me to refresh. I was so mindful that I wasn't trying to make my questions while you were talking, which is not like me, but
Yeah, that was good actually.
Because I think the first part, I was going to say this, or one thought that came to me while you were talking is, I know we're in an age where coming up with a new word and a new theme and a new cause, every month, and then it buzzes across the world as like a really in thing. Mm-hmm. But the basic part of mindfulness that stuck to me was, wow, you just have to listen. You just, if we could just start there. And I think maybe it helps those of us that are listened challenged, like I have been most of my life. Maybe though it helps to have this other term, mindfulness. And I really like kindfulness. I think that's a simpler way to just, you have to make an effort to be kind. Especially if you want to do it in the workplace, there are moments when you just don't feel like being kind. So if you cultivate that, I can see a good impact in the workplace for that. Now, I wanted to, can you make it, Shamash? Can you make it go up? I was going to think. Okay. Now, I wanted to comment and talk about the single tasker.
Sure.
The generation before us would have easily said that is the way you're supposed to do it. Our parents, or maybe our grandparents especially. Mm-hmm. The whole concept of multitasking, which is like, I'm an end baby boomer. Mm-hmm. So maybe from the end of my generation on to the early millennials, this is the only thing we've known because of the computer, because of TV, because of the ease of being able to do more things. Mm-hmm. Because we're curious, and I don't know, but I'm curious, and I always want to do more things because I know time is limited. Mm-hmm. And I'm already saying, okay, God, I'm 53. I've got about, okay, if I really work at it, maybe 20 good years left, maybe 10 really, really active. And I've got too many things I want to do. And I'll never be able to get them done if I go back to single tasking.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hard to be convinced to be a single tasker, even though I do know for sure and concur that you are going to get a better quality work done on that particular task if you focus on it.
Yeah.
So how do you in the workplace, in life, or whatever, kind of what's the term in English? I've forgotten the term even in English, but how do you work with trying to get the best of those both worlds? In the sense of, I'll give you an example. A few days ago, for about a week, five good days, I was able to single task 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, throughout my day. Maybe I only did 3, 4 big tasks at the most in the day, but no task was related to the other. One task was for one project. When I got it done, then I moved to a different task. It had to do with a different project. And I did a third task and had to do some totally, with something else. And I did that for about 3 or 4 days. And I felt really productive. And I felt really good. And I wasn't multitasking because I wasn't doing things simultaneously. I did one thing at a time, but they weren't related. I didn't lock my mind down to, Jane, you have to spend all day today studying. You're behind on da-da-da-da. You have to do nothing but study. No, I said, okay, you're not going to be able to do that. Do one thing that you like and but you have to get that task done on it. Then move to another thing, maybe that you don't necessarily want to get done, but you have to do. But I still felt really good about my week. And I was going to ask your opinion, is that a way to maybe to balance wanting to do multiple projects, maybe that's a better term, and still be a single tasker?
Yeah, I think you proved it for yourself in that process. You managed to do one task at a time. You focused it, and you said after a few days you felt better, you felt more energized, you felt more productive. So doesn't that suggests that that was an example of single tasking? You're doing one thing at a time.
Yeah,
that's a very mindful process you did.
Well, but I don't know how I fell into it, but, maybe I think it was, to be honest, some of what I was doing with Happy Melly that particular week and our focus on certain mindfulness things. And also because I'm also working with another entrepreneurial mentor group, and we get certain tasks. And I said, Jane, okay, you're doing this number of projects. I said, the only way you're going to be able to advance on at least half to 2/3 of your projects is do one important single task for each one or most of them every day, because I like them all. I mean, you know what I mean? I enjoy doing them all, and I don't want to give up any of them for the most way.
Yeah. I think you got a great solution there.
And I bring it up because at work, your boss doesn't want to hear, okay, who's that end of baby boomer like me, does not really want to hear, no, we can't work on all the projects at the same time. Even though when you try to tell them, please, and we just make a priority, they will not listen. And I'm having a difficult time at work trying to.
I've got a great book recommendation, which you may have read. I don't know. It's called The One Thing.
Oh, no, I haven't.
The One Thing. So it's by one of a very, very successful real estate company guy. But he used to coach his staff. And after the coaching session, he used to give them 5 tasks to do. They never did it. Then he gave them 4 tasks to do, 3 tasks. In the end, he realized that if he just gave them one thing to do, they used to do that before the next call. And then he started realizing this power of the one thing is actually really, really powerful, not just for individuals, but organizations. So he looks at someone like, a company like Microsoft, and they do one thing really well, which was to do with software. Google is one thing they really do really well, which is search. And actually, there's so many examples of organizations and people is when they can focus on one thing, that thing can actually have a massive positive difference. But it actually talks about loads and loads of different, not just examples, but aspects of the way the brain works, and why focusing on one thing, at least one thing at a time, at least prioritizing the most important thing. Like you mentioned 4 or 5 projects that you love them all. You can't put any of them down. But I like the way that for each of those projects, there's lots of other stuff that comes out of it. And you're choosing to just do one thing out of that, the most important one, and then doing that. And when that's done, you're going to the next most important project, and then choosing the one thing that's really important and just doing that and nothing else. So that's a beautiful example of single tasking and taking things in a mindful way, actually.
Okay, now.
In the book, just to kind of add, the book, the one thing, a nice little question. The whole book is kind of hinged on one question that you should ask yourself. And from memory, the question is, what's the one thing I can do, having done which everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? So it's a process of making your life more simpler. So it's a process of kind of delegating things or prioritizing things. So you really focus on something which almost has, it has a sense of leverage about it. It gives all sorts of other different examples linked to that. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. I think that you've given a beautiful example of how you were single tasking and how it energized you, made you feel good, and you're working on projects that you're passionate about. That's really beautiful. But the other thing to remember about being present and enjoying what we're doing is that although, yes, you say, ideally you may have 10 years or 20 years, but and I know and everyone knows that the reality is we don't know.
I know. Tomorrow I could be gone. Tonight,
yeah, we've only got this moment.
And I say that all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I noticed when I was giving the presentation, you were actually very present. When people are doing presentations online, it's very easy to be checking your phone or checking other stuff, not really being present. But you're very present to what I was saying. And it's important because this is the only moment you have.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, exactly. So we need to, if you want to make the most of our lives, and if the only moment we can be sure that we have is this moment, the only thing we can do is to give attention to this moment. There's another beautiful story that my teacher shares, and I think it's a Tolstoy story, and it's a king, and the king wants to know the answer to 3 questions, which is, what's the most important time? Who's the most important person? And what's the most important thing to do? And he thinks that if he can answer those 3 questions, then he's got the answer to life, like the solution to how life works. And he goes off into the forest, and he eventually finds his hermit, and his whole story about how he discovers the answers to these questions. But the first question he works out, the most important time is, of course, the here and now, the present moment. The most important person is the person that's in front of you. So at the moment, you're in front of me, so you are the most important person. But if it switches screens and I'm talking to Christian, then he's the most important person, and you're not anymore. One person, okay? But the other cool thing to remember is that when you're on your own, the most important person is yourself. And then the third question, what's the most important thing to do? The answer to that question was to care. So whoever's in front of you, doesn't matter who it is, the CEO of the biggest company in the world or the simple homeless person on the street, the idea is to care for them as best you can. And when you're on your own, the most important person to care for is yourself as well. And I think this is such a beautiful, simple bit of advice for everything that we do in life, actually. It's very, very, I think, sometimes the most deep questions in life comes down to very simple answers. And it's even being used in some big companies and airlines and organizations, this concept of answering these 3 questions. If a company does that, they would have the best customer service in the world. But also the staff will feel fantastic because they're caring for the people around them. And then when they have time for themselves, hopefully they're caring for themselves too. So they're recharging themselves. So this single tasker is just a small part of something which is actually really, really important for a life that's worth living type thing, to really live a fulfilling life, to be really present with what we're doing.
I have one question then related to this and actually any of these things, and even the whole practice of mindfulness. In preparation for all of this, I so nicely put a new mindfulness tool on my cell phone that rings me every 2 hours and does a little chime. I do absolutely nothing when it buzzes. I'm honest. And it just reminds me to pause. And I thought to myself, so the question is, how do you cultivate a habit? Now, I've read, heard, had classes when I was young, but the example I gave about the single tasker, it just came. I can't analyze right now what was happening that helped me to get into that sweet spot. I'm out of it at the moment, and I want to very quickly return. But with one caveat, I hate habits. I do not like routine.
Me too.
So that's what I wanted to ask about. How can you have habits and routine and psych yourself out that it isn't, that it's just you?
I'll give you, this is a great question. Do you have like what comes to mind at the moment and how I'm going to explain this is that I love chocolate. Now, if there's some chocolate around and I find that chocolate, it's not a discipline for me to eat it. It's a joy for me to eat it. I very happily unwrap it and pick up. In fact, I think I might have some after describing it. I could eat some whole nut chocolate right now and eat it. There's no discipline. It's an absolute joy. It's an absolute pleasure. There's nothing about it's a habit that I need to have. It is a habit every day almost, and I'm enjoying it a lot, right? And it hasn't been tough to create that habit. The thing about mindfulness is that if you can bring the kindfulness bit, the love, the care, I mean, I think our deepest human need is the feeling of love. And you can cultivate that love towards other people and also towards ourselves. It feels better than chocolate. It's the best thing ever.
I agree.
So that bell that you hear, if you enjoy hearing the sound of that bell, and if you enjoy taking a deep breath in and out in that moment and really enjoy it, and it really makes you smile, or if it doesn't, actually smiling a little bit and really enjoying it, then the habit is not going to be it's not going to be to do with discipline, because I don't believe that meditation, mindfulness is about discipline. It's actually, it's another word for life. It's about being present. So, you don't have to be disciplined to be connected to life. It's something wonderful. Like little babies and animals, they're not having to be disciplined to play. I mean, play is a fantastic example of what it means to be mindful and to be present and also to be kindful and stuff. I saw a little girl the other day, and I think she was 3 or 4 years old, and she came up to me. I said, high five. And she's like, can I not have a hug? I'd never met her before, and she wanted to have a hug. This is beautiful kindfulness or love that they have naturally within themselves. So this is what I would urge you to do. Like, I don't know if you've ever tried any meditations, but if you do try them, or if you do find one that you really enjoy. It might be a visualization or a meditation or something that you really like and you really look forward to, and get into the most cozy position you can find. Like if you like lying down in bed with your covers on you, go for it. Call it meditation instead of meditation. Find something that feels really comfortable and cozy, and it's like a treat for you. And then it's not going to have to be a discipline. It's going to be more of something that you enjoy. So that's the advice that I would give.
Well, thank you. I really think I'm going to focus more on kindfulness as far as thinking of it that way. So say, when's your next book? When's your next book? So I'm going to be tweeting about it. You know why? I'll tell you why. Because that is more of, I come from a Christian faith background, and if there's one thing that I've worked on all my life and maybe had less difficulty working on is being kind. It's just more natural. And so I relate to that more than mindfulness. And it's like you said, it makes me think of I'm gonna meditate and I'm gonna torture myself. I can't think. When I heard you said you meditate for an hour, I was like, not, can you imagine no thoughts for an hour? You're just I was just talking with a coworker and he has a similar problem. I was like, Mike, your brain is like it's just never stopping. And how can we just stop it sometimes, So you're just, because I was telling him I was going to start this mindfulness thing. And I said, because I know I need it, just to woo. And I realized though, but it's a part of me. And I don't feel stressed when my mind is thinking. It just depends on what it's thinking on. Yeah. Now, I do agree about what you said, and all the science backs it, and my life backs it. It's if you just let it go, at certain moments you're going to think about negative things, and then you get in the cycle, and you have to cut it off. Yeah. But a lot of times I'm not thinking negatively, and it's comfortable, and it's not stressful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the
everyone's different. You need to do what works for you. Like for you, the kindfulness resonates.
Yes.
Rather than trying to control your thoughts. Actually, that's another mistake that people make, I think, when teaching meditation. It's not about control. It's a process of letting go. So if you do ever try this meditation stuff, sit down and just say to your mind, think whatever you want. I'll be here. I'm not going to
let it go.
Let it go, baby. Say, I'm not going to be a control freak anymore. Think whatever you want. And whenever I do that, it just goes, it can't think of anything actually. But you just let it go, let it be. And your job is just to watch it and just see what happens. It's very, very interesting if you try it. And that's what meditation is about. It's not about control. It's the opposite of control. That's why you can meditate for an hour. You can meditate for a day. You can do it for as long as you want. It's not about effort. It's the opposite of effort.
All right.
Yeah, that's...
I'm going to let Christian go because I've been monopolizing the time.
Easy, no problem. I'm here for that.
Great question.
I think you can write a dictionary. I already have 2 new words from you today, which is kindfulness and bedfulness.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Not bedfulness, meditation.
Meditation. It's even better. That's a cool one.
Meditation. I like that.
Yeah.
Meditation and kindfulness. Yeah.
And speaking about words, I was wondering, I have always the 2 words in mind, which is mindfulness and meditation. Yes. Would you say something? Is the difference, similarities, how?
Yeah, so mindfulness is about cultivating this present moment awareness, and it can be happen at any time. So you can be doing it now. Like I'm speaking, and you can be mindful. You can be present. You're walking down the street. You can do it as long as you're awake. You can practice it with whatever you're doing. But meditation is usually defined as a certain period of time, whether it's 1 minute or 10 seconds or 1 hour or whatever you decide, where you actually say, this is the time where I'm going to cultivate this present moment awareness. And there's many types of meditation, but they're ultimately all about the art of letting go. And then they use different strategies, whether you're looking at a candle or saying a mantra or feeling your breathing or hopping on one leg meditation. They come up with all this different stuff, but they're all about teaching you how to let go ultimately. So that's what they're all about. So mindfulness is about this. It can be practiced at any time. And so the more meditation you do, usually the more you're able to be mindful in your everyday lives and you be more conscious and present. And the more conscious and present and kindful you are in your everyday lives, the more easier it is to do the meditation. So they work with each other. Some people are more into, mindful swimming or mindful walking their dog, or they don't like the meditation stuff. And some people love it. So it depends on what works for you. Some people like the kind of Tai Chi and the yoga approach to meditation in a way.
Like Tai Chi.
Yeah. You like Tai Chi, do you?
Yeah, I haven't practiced it except for 2 or 3 times, but I did. My husband was into jujitsu before, and he's very much into different martial arts. And he had introduced me a little into Tai Chi. And just about 2 weeks ago at work, I thought we were going to start a little Tai Chi group for the morning, and I was so looking forward to it. And we did 1 session, and it really changed the way the workday started. It just, it made a real difference because it's not the teacher said, you know, at first it's stressful. He said, because you have to learn to focus on your movements. And he said, but then with time, it's about flow. And that's what I like about when I see it. I think it's a beautiful way to just be present.
Yeah, I agree. That's a fantastic. And like, it sounds like that's something that could work for you. Maybe you can go into YouTube every morning for 5 minutes, type in Tai Chi and see what comes up. Maybe there's a little, you could just start the day with a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of that.
Yeah, just that flow. And when you said about flow, which book is it? The book was named Flow?
Yeah, it's a fantastic, one of the best books of all time. It's by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. If you just type flow on Amazon, it'll probably be the first one that comes up. And it's an actual psychological concept.
So flow and one thing.
Yeah, the one thing and flow.
So I've got the simple titles, right?
Well, if you're going to do the one thing, you can only get one book, actually, which is the one.
Oh my gosh!
You can't order 2 books if you learn about the one thing.
First, I got to finish the one thing.
Yeah, finish the one thing. And once you've done the one thing, maybe you can have another thing.
Oh, one question about Christian bringing up meditation.
Yeah.
Why do we talk about group meditation? How can you have group meditation?
How? Or why?
Other than people sitting next to each other meditating.
Oh, it's fantastic. You should try it.
Really?
Yeah. It feels so different. Like if you do Tai Chi with the Tai Chi teacher and you're doing it all together in a group, that's very different to practicing on your own, right?
Yeah, it was different. We were in a group and well, no, just, I don't know. I've never done the Tai Chi alone, only with at least 1 or 5 or so other people.
There you go. No, there's a sense of, like, I call it energy, but you can just feel this sense of presence when there's other people together. I've been on these silent retreats, right, where for 10 days you're doing meditation with all these people, and by the end of it, we're all friends, but we've never spoken to each other. Like, oh yeah, how you doing? I love the way you drink the orange juice. It's incredible. The way you flick your hair, love it. And yeah, it's amazing. Even if you're not even speaking to each other, like if we were, probably would be a bit weird on a Zoom call to be sitting in silence together. Actually, if we just sat here and we just looked at each other for like 10-15 minutes, there would be a bit of a bond that was created between each of us. Like, hey man, I just think you're awesome. The way you were just sitting there. So even being silent together, somehow there's this kind of connection, especially if you're practicing something like kindfulness. You're bringing that sense of warmth and care towards other people, and that you build that sense of connection. So I would recommend doing a group meditation class if you can in your area. It's always good to try something new.
Okay, so maybe we're slowly coming to the end of the seminar. I'm just gonna have some basic question. Last one. Which advice would you give for people to start? I saw that on your website when I was browsing around. You have a free introduction week. Is it correct?
Yeah. So this kindfulness, we created an 8-week cinematic course on kindfulness. I spent a year making it with these filmmakers. So they're proper filmmakers, so they had all the good cameras. And so we created an 8-week course of video every single day for 8 weeks with the little meditations, like starts with just 5-minute meditations and stuff. And the first week is free if you go to kindfulnessonline.com. So you can try it out for a week, watch the videos for a week. And if you really like it, then you can do the course. And that's a nice online way of experiencing what I mean by kindfulness, about bringing the love and the compassion and the care towards yourself and towards other people. There might even be some tree hugging in there at some point. So yeah, good. It's pretty advanced stuff.
Any cat hugging in there? Because I can go to that. You know, one of the only reasons I got cats was because I said, honey, we're stressed. We need some pets. We need some. And now, no, but this is not funny. This part is not funny. One of my cats is now very, very stressed, and he's licked half of his fur off. Oh, nice. And we're trying to figure out with the vet what to do to unstress him. And I'm almost positive that this poor cat is probably felt the level maybe at times of stress in the house or in the family, and also because he sees tomcats outside and it stresses him, you know, because he thinks it's a territorial thing. But I've had pets all my life, and I would never have thought that a negative, a distress could happen to a cat.
Wow.
Yeah, can you imagine?
Don't you think it's some other sort of disease or something that the cat's got?
No. The vet has. She's looked at it all, and yes. Oui, attends. Je sais pas si c'est terminé. No, the vet is almost positive, and my husband even looked up online. He has all the symptoms, and it's some god awful whatever name that they give it, and it's a psychologically term for a stress that he's apparently cats or animals, I assume other animals, they build. It never, you know, like with us, we can have a stress, goes away, then something comes up, no, apparently there's layers, she said. And and I'm like, oh my God, I hope I didn't do this to my cat.
Poor cat. No.
Poor cat.
No. Don't think like that.
His brother isn't like that. I mean, we have two, same mother. Yeah, but you know, I don't know, can't get the cat to do any mindfulness, however.
But I just a quick thing before we finish. I remember I wrote this other book on relaxation, and I was researching pets and how pets can create relaxation, cats and dogs and other animals. And when they research people stroking their own cats, that builds up the same sense of mindfulness and actually the kindfulness that I'm talking about. And that's a nice way of cultivating a meditation. If you do have a cat and just gently stroking it and feeling the warmth of the skin against your hand, it's very soothing, that sense of touch that you've got too.
Oh, it is.
It can be a very that's a meditation in itself. That could be your bell. Like, you know, if you don't want to do your meditation in the morning, you can do your catitation.
Meditation. Oh, we've got 3 words now. Catitation.
Catitation, yeah.
No, but you know, I would have never thought of that. But that's not a bad idea, at least with his brother. But that, or even him, that might help the cat to be better.
Yeah, I will. I think it will. Yeah.
Give
it a go.
Yeah, so that brings us to the end of today's seminar. I think we can, with a big laugh, we can wish to everybody a kindfulness day.
Yeah.
Laughful day.
And thank you so much, Shamash, for your patience and your time.
Thank you. No, thank you. Pleasure.